Now I know what y'all are thinking, what an overdramatic title, but if you allow me to explain myself in this video, hopefully you'll gain an understanding as to why I gave it such a jarring title. Now the decline of gaming is a topic that isn't new, as there have been numerous videos that have discussed the worsening of the gaming industry. Whether it be the release of broken games, shady microtransactions, the lack of creativity in the AAA space, or the redundancy in the AAA space, it has been made clear that as of late, companies have become less concerned with consumer satisfaction and more concerned with their profit margins. Thus, due to the ever-growing greed in the gaming industry, its well-being has diminished. But what inspired me to make this video now of all times is due to the recent interview Kind of Funny had with the head of Xbox, Phil Spencer. Now once again, you can call me overdramatic, but I genuinely believe that this interview is a catalyst of worse things to come, and the reasonings for my psychotic statement will be answered in the following. Now the first and most abhorrent statement Phil Spencer said was, "I see commentary that if you just build great games, everything will turn around. It's just not true." Now when I heard this statement, I was dumbfounded by how idiotic it was. As the CEO of a huge gaming publisher and hardware manufacturer, Spencer should be aware of gaming's history and that the success of gaming consoles has always been tied to great games. For instance, Sega needed exclusive games such as Sonic the Hedgehog to compete against Nintendo. Also, with great games such as Final Fantasy VII, Crash Bandicoot, and Tekken, Sony's PlayStation outsold the Nintendo 64. And lastly, with Microsoft's partnership with Bungie, Xbox gained a massive hit with Halo, which solidified Xbox in the gaming industry. Therefore, Phil Spencer needs to realize that the reason as to why he lost in the Xbox One era and is losing now is because of Xbox's lack of great exclusive games and the mismanagement of their first-party studios. If you look at Halo and Gears for example, these are both franchises that led Xbox to great success. But now, both Halo and Gears are a shell of themselves. So, it's to no surprise that with the decline of those games came the decline of the Xbox brand. Hence, with the examples of Sega, Sony, and Xbox, it is indisputable that a gaming company's success is directly tied to their ability to produce great games. But the final statement of Spencer's that I will address is the one where he stated, "We're not in the business of outconsoling Sony or Nintendo. When you're in third place and the top two players are as strong as they are, and in certain cases have a very discreet focus on doing deals and other things, make being on Xbox hard as a team." Now this statement is ridiculous. For one, Xbox had deals with third parties such as Activision and BioWare, just like Sony and Nintendo have deals with Square Enix and Capcom. So Phil Spencer being upset at Sony and Nintendo for doing what he and his colleagues have been doing for years, but better, is absurd. But although Spencer's complaints about his competition's deals are hypocritical, the key takeaway from the statement is that he is essentially waving the white flag. Now I know what some of you may be thinking. What's wrong if Xbox goes down? We still have Sony and Nintendo. But that's exactly the problem. With Xbox out of the console race, Sony now virtually has a monopoly and is unchallenged. And you may think that Nintendo is still a competitor, but truthfully, they are not. Nintendo is in its own lane in the handheld market, and the Switch is not powerful enough to compete with the PS5. Hence, Sony's only true competitor in the console space was Xbox. Therefore, with Phil Spencer's denial of great games and complaints about Sony's success, he essentially surrendered and simultaneously ruined Xbox's brand. But if Spencer just looked at gaming's history, he would realize that it is never too late to turn things around. On May 28, 1991, at the Consumer Electronics Show, Sony announced that they were working with Nintendo to create a disc version of the Super Nintendo called the Nintendo PlayStation. However, the day after Sony's announcement, Nintendo backstabbed them by announcing that they were dropping their relationship with Sony and instead were partnering up with Sony's rival, Philips. Now, Sony could have called it quits after being humiliated publicly by Nintendo. However, instead of quitting, Sony decided to launch their own gaming console to compete against Nintendo. And as a result, Sony beat Nintendo at their own game, with Sony's PlayStation outselling the Nintendo 64. And trailing the success of Sony's PlayStation, Sony would hit gold again, as the PlayStation 2 would become the best-selling video game console of all time. And even though Sony would face a lot of turmoil after the launch of the PS3, they were able to turn things around and reach great success with the PS4 and now PS5. Now, if we transition to Nintendo, we can see similar comeback stories. Now, although the Nintendo 64 is beloved, like I mentioned before, Nintendo would lose to Sony's PS1. And in addition, even though Nintendo's GameCube was a modest success, it placed third in the console race, as it was outsold by Microsoft's Xbox and Sony's PS2. Moreover, despite Nintendo's Wii selling tremendously, it did no favors in garnering reverence from the hardcore gamers, as it gained the reputation of being too casual. Hence, hardcore gamers gravitated towards the Xbox 360 and PS3 for more mature and technologically sophisticated games. And to make matters worse, the Wii did not receive a lot of third-party support due to its hardware limitations. Now, these dilemmas would not affect the sales of the Wii too much, but they would be the main reasons that led to the Wii U being one of Nintendo's biggest failures. That is, until the Nintendo Switch. Even though the Switch still lacks in the hardware department, its deliverance of quality games enables Nintendo to turn things around. Therefore, when Phil Spencer says that it's too late to turn things around, that is a blatant lie. It is never too late to turn things around, as we saw with Sony and Nintendo. So, instead of saying it's too late, Phil Spencer should take lessons from Sony and Nintendo's past mistakes and reassess the management at Xbox to see what went wrong and try to fix it. One example of Xbox's mismanagement can be seen in their failed acquisition of Activision Blizzard. Now, this acquisition from Xbox was problematic, not only because it failed, but because it showed that Xbox were willing to ask Microsoft for $70 billion to acquire another publisher, but were not willing to spend that kind of money on their own studios. I mean, Xbox being backed up by Microsoft is a huge benefit, but it is evident that Xbox is not using their leverage from Microsoft wisely if they can't invest their money into their own games. All in all, this reckless spending just shows that Xbox is trying to find an easy fix for their problems, but are not addressing the root cause of their problems, which is their mismanagement. It doesn't matter how many developers Xbox acquires. If they continue to mismanage the studios, their products will all end up like Halo Infinite or Redfall. So, with all that being said, Phil Spencer has tarnished Xbox's brand. And as a consumer, why would I want to involve myself with a brand that admits defeat and does not seek to rectify their mistakes? If we look at brands such as Nike, Adidas, Apple, Samsung, Mercedes-Benz, BMW, Rolls-Royce, etc., all these brands hold themselves to a standard, and with their products, invite consumers to be a part of their culture. The same notion can be applied to gaming. With Sony's slogan, "Greatness awaits," they deliver on that greatness with games such as God of War, The Last of Us, and Uncharted. With Nintendo, the same can be said in terms of the quality of games, with franchises like Mario, Zelda, Fire Emblem, Bayonetta, Animal Crossing, and Xenoblade. But if you look towards Xbox, there is nothing to look forward to, and Phil Spencer's interview at Kinda Funny did nothing for the consumer to gain confidence in the Xbox brand. But let's wrap this video up. The main reason as to why I wanted to make this video is because with Xbox's surrenderance, PlayStation now has a monopoly on console gaming, which means now they can do whatever they want, whenever they want, and no one will contest them. And if you think PlayStation won't abuse their influence, just take a look back at the launch of the PS3 when Sony sold it for $499, which with inflation would be $733 now. All this to say, we need competition in the gaming industry because if not, there won't be any checks and balances on companies. Even now, gaming companies are trying to get away with releasing broken games, shady microtransactions, and re-releasing the same game over and over again. In summary, when I say gaming is about to get worse, I mean it. And with Xbox's withdrawal from competing in the gaming space, I genuinely believe that it cannot be good for the well-being of gaming.